everyone. Welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth and becoming the best version of yourself. Today is Saturday, where Cesar and I always record because we do work full time, and we have a super exciting episode that I've been waiting for weeks. I feel like I've hinted at it on our channel, but I never really said who is coming on or why I was excited. But today we have Stephanie from Road to Tech. I actually came across her Instagram just because I was searching for people who are going to be like more inspiring to me and just more in our niche of growth and, you know, trying new things and just really finding out what like we're meant to do. And I found her page where she teaches people to break into tech, what they need to do. She's a career coach. She does LinkedIn and resume building. So she's just helping people like put their best foot forward. And I think that's just awesome and super inspiring and much needed in this kind of environment and climate, especially in the job market currently. So without further ado, here's Stephanie. Stephanie, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great. I'm actually really excited to talk with you all.
I'm so excited. That's so exciting to me. I was honestly not like when I messaged you on Instagram, I was like, this is like a 1 in 1,000 chance. She could never see this message, and that's okay. I was like, I'm just gonna shoot my shot. Maybe she'll be on the podcast. So I was really excited when you answered. I think I woke up at I was already asleep and I saw the message. I was like, Cesar, she said yes. So that was super exciting on our end. But tell us a little bit about you. Like, who are you? Who is Stephanie?
I am certainly a multifaceted person. For those who don't know, probably most people. So I am a self-taught software engineer. I currently work at PayPal, but my passions outside of work would be helping other people get into tech. So that's why I run the Road to Tech. So that's there's like two different parts to it. So there's like community aspect and the educational part where I put out a lot of content related to how to get into tech. But then there's the part where I have the services. So I do have a mentorship type of program, and then I have like other services as well. So that's a little bit about what I am in a nutshell.
What made you like specifically into tech? Because your background was in mechanical engineering, right? Or was that wrong?
It was in chemical engineering, so it's not that far off. It's probably because you saw like manufacturing somewhere in my bio. Yeah, so I wanted to get into tech because I was like exploring different kind of avenues, and back about 4 or 5 years ago, I had met somebody who worked in tech, and at this time, like I was in South Carolina, where I had lived for almost my entire life before I met this person, and then he was like, "Hey, why don't you talk to some people in my tech office, just kind of like explore and see what else is out there." And so after I met a few product managers from his company, and then that's kind of like how I realized that tech would probably be the best type of career choice for me, because it just involves a lot of like creativity and technical aspects, and that's what makes my brain happy.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like recently I'm on TikTok all the time, probably way more than I should be. But a lot of people I feel like within the past year have been talking about like breaking into tech, going into tech, and kind of how fruitful that kind of career is. But I think in the realm of TikTok, they're kind of talking about other tech roles, but the tech roles that you're coaching people for, they more involve like coding and hands-on stuff. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. I would say how I like differentiate myself from other I would say like tech influencers and other like career coaches is that I focus on people who want to go down the self-taught route, because there's not enough people who actually talk about it. There's plenty of people who talk about like their boot camp experience, or like they have a CS degree background. But since like I've walked the path of like being completely self-taught and also being able to get my job without like a referral or applying online, I try to put that information out there, because like no one's talking about it, not even like recruiters.
Yeah, that's super important because I think it's I think from my perspective, I'm super into like career development, but it can feel like there's a lot of barriers to entry in certain
Mhm.
positions, and that you do have to have like professional experience, or there's not really many routes that you can take where you are self-taught. So I think it's an interesting take to be like, hey, you can do this if you teach yourself, if you take the time, and it's not as guarded, but it does take kind of some work on your end. But what were some of the greatest challenges you faced when you first got into tech and when it came to learning how to code and kind of figuring out what that was going to look like for yourself, not just to teach others, but just for you?
So there's like actually a lot of aspects to it. I would say like one and the biggest thing that I struggled with, and I've also seen a lot of people who starts to get the idea like, oh yeah, I want to learn how to code. The biggest struggle is really the mindset. Um, because you gotta think about it, like not a lot of people around us do complete like 180-degree career changes. So it's almost like shooting in the dark
Yeah.
sometimes
Oh, wow.
because you don't really know who to ask, you don't know what to ask, you don't know what to Google. Um yeah, it's a lonely process, and I will say, like, I actually tried 3 times to get myself into, like, coding and building projects before, the 3rd time was the successful one because I
Yeah.
finally made up my mind and was telling myself, like, "Hey, I really don't like being in manufacturing. It's not serving me. I'm not even putting out my best work. So I really need to just focus on something else that um, it would be a big change, but it could be worth a lot in the end because of happiness. It's really what I was trying to go for.
Yeah.
Um, so I was really trying to overcome that sort of like barrier in my own mind that like I can do it and I am worthy of trying to go down the self-taught route rather than just trying to go back to the old ways of like just finding another manufacturing job.
When you
Yeah, it can be like super like wanting to stay in like what's comfortable. Like, hey, like I'm not doing horrible here. I could still do
Exactly.
this. But it's also like when it comes to like your own personal happiness and also knowing like that you're capable of more. I think I experienced a lot of like I'm a person of many different interests, which is kind of difficult when you're trying to find a career. Like, is this the best thing for me to be doing right now? Um, but yeah, it is a barrier in your mind because sometimes you think like, is this gonna be worth it in the end? You're thinking of so many different
Hmm.
things in the large, like grand scheme of things. Did you have something to say though,
Yeah,
Caesar?
no, I was wondering because you had mentioned that it was on your third time that you actually like went in and started actually learning how to code. But those first and second times, like what was it that stopped you? Like was it just like a mindset thing, or was it just you didn't get the right information? Were you just like looking on Google or like tutorials on YouTube or something?
Yeah. The first 2 times, it was actually more of a, just a life thing.
Oh, okay.
Because like, the first time, I actually quit my first job, and I was like, "Okay, let me try exploring different kinds of areas in tech," just going all in, just trying to figure out, like, what would be best for me. So, I tried out, product management, I even went down the route of, being able to get some interviews, but it was too difficult, too competitive even back in, like, 2018, and I realized that, I just wasn't set up for success at that time to just go all in and try to learn how to code. Like, I was having financial problems because, I had quit a job, so I didn't get unemployment benefits, and then um I, like, just moved to, San Diego, so I moved cross country, and then so I didn't really have any support around me, didn't really know anybody, and then, uh, yeah, and then I also just didn't have support in general from,
Yeah.
like, my parents, and it's kinda difficult when you're trying to go through all those different, um, hurdles, life hurdles,
Yeah.
the financial aspect, definitely, and then the second time, I had lost my second job.
Oh
I got
man.
laid off. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, so maybe this is like a sign. Let me just try picking up coding again. But um even though I was laid off, I wasn't able to get unemployment benefits. Like I was short $600 from qualifying.
Wow.
And yeah, I was in like true panic mode. Like I didn't think it would take me a long time to find a job. So I was like, oh, let me like pick up coding again. That only lasted for like a month.
Well, until you found, and
Yeah.
then now you found your current job that you work at.
Yeah, it was actually like the third time. So it was the second time I
Oh
ended up getting
wow.
laid off. Yeah. And then I was like, you know what? If I just keep like losing my job over and over again, it's just not like it's not sustainable. It's like you also can never just build a savings either because you keep having to drain it every time. And then so that's when I decided like, okay, I'm just gonna go all in. And then at that time I was like better set up in life. Like I was able to get unemployment benefits, and because the pandemic happened, I was able to get an extra like 600 a week on top of it. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't stressed over money. And then I had like full support from my family and friends. A good friend of mine, he offered to mentor me, so that was huge. And yeah, and I wasn't having to move around all the time either, because now or I ended up getting this place in LA, and I didn't have to worry about like losing the place or having to move or anything. So
Yeah.
I
yeah,
think that's
long journey.
I think that
Yeah.
brings up a good point, though. A lot of times, a lot of barriers are kind of what's going on in our life, whether it be like finances. Like, obviously, we've talked about a couple of our podcasts how sometimes things that you do are truly just a means to an end. Like, you do have to support yourself. So sometimes it can feel like you don't have a lot of room to explore other avenues or to really figure out and hone in on the things you actually want to be doing. Or like when it comes to support, a key thing in my life is I want to have the support of those around me. And so when you're going down paths where people don't necessarily agree, they're like, oh, like, I don't know about this. It can kind of feel like, am I doing the wrong thing? It starts to kind of fill you with doubt, and like it really screws with your mindset of
Yeah.
like, can I actually do this? And so I can relate to why it takes like, a couple tries to actually like really make that decision for yourself. But once you got into tech, like obviously, like you made it there, which is just incredible in itself because it really is like a 180-degree turn to switch a career. Was there like any fear involved, even though you landed yourself the job and you're kind of confident in like the knowledge that you had taught yourself? Was there fear or imposter syndrome in that first role?
Ooh, definitely. Yeah, definitely in like the first few months. Um, I yeah, I definitely doubted myself. And then um but I think the good thing is that I was really fortunate that um yeah, I gotten through so many jobs within 4 years. And so I already knew like what I really wanted in my next job, even if it was like in tech or even in any other industry. And then so I knew like what I needed to feel comfortable and feel set up for success. And just so happened that the PayPal job checked off every box. And I would also say that even during interviews, I could tell that I would be able to work really well with the people on the team, and that turned out to be true. So even though like I definitely had doubts in my coding abilities, and then I was putting pressure on myself, like, oh, I'm not coding or like debugging fast enough and whatnot. And I found that yeah, my coworkers who are most of them are still the same ones that I started out with. Like everyone was super supportive and made me feel comfortable. Like even if I asked them questions, they never said like, "Oh, stop asking questions." Or and I mean, not like that, but just made me feel uncomfortable that they didn't want me to ask any more questions. Because sometimes
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
that about coworkers.
Yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
it's like, shouldn't you know this? Or like, you don't feel like
exactly.
you're in an environment where you can ask like what you feel like maybe be something you should know, but like, it's new.
Mhm.
And I get that because I'm like always hesitant, like when I start a new job to ask for help, or like I kind of just feel like there's this assumption that I should know everything. Even like my job that
Mhm.
I have now was entry level, so there were some things that I wouldn't know, but it still was so hard for me to be like, can I go ask this person this question? Is this gonna make me look some type of way? Um,
Exactly.
but
Mhm.
that's honestly like so honestly, it's so impressive. I hear so many people about talk about breaking into tech. Even like one of my friends, she's a teacher, and she was like, maybe I just need to like switch my career and go into
Oh
tech.
gosh.
She really wasn't happy with what
Mhm.
she was doing. But I think something I was curious about is obviously, like, you know, you had a background in chemical engineering, you had worked in manufacturing, and then you made this career switch. How did you redefine like what your career path was going to look like, what career development looked like to you now, and what your future goals would be now that you're in tech?
I was asking myself this like almost every week for like the past few months. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, do I really want to be an engineer for like the next 5, 10 years? Do I want to try something else? Um, so I would say, yeah, a few years ago, because I realized that working in manufacturing just wasn't right for me, and both mentally, physically, and also just wasn't challenging for me. Even though I was working in a lot of like startup manufacturing environments, but it was just basically putting out a lot of fires. And like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mentioned before, I'm a very creative person, but there's not that sort of like same creativity that's in manufacturing that you ever find like in tech, or like other roles. And I always like thinking like, oh yeah, I could do better.
Yeah.
I could probably find something that really clicks with me, and I don't have to dread going to work every morning, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so yeah, back then I just wanted to find something where I could use both sides of my brain. And I think like right now, like now that like I have achieved that and I was able to get that software engineering role as an iOS developer, and also my team gives us certain freedoms and being able to express like what we believe would be the best user experience, the best UI, and think of things from like a business point of view, not just from like an engineering point of view.
Yeah.
But now I also want to dive deeper into my other passions, which would be related to business. As you know, I run Road to Tech, and something I'm really passionate about. I've known since I was 21 that I wanted to start a business, but I just never knew what it was.
Yeah.
And I just believe like what I have gained over the last 2 to 3 years running my own business, I definitely want to bring that more into my job. That would make me really happy. And yeah, so far, well, we'll see how things go. My company, they're at least supportive of career changes, career goals. So we will see what the next 5 years brings.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I mean it's can be hard to like define like what the next 5 years looks like, especially like
Hmm.
because I feel like you're in such a unique position where like you have a great job at PayPal, but you also have this opportunity to help so many people with your page Road to Tech and like, you know, career coaching, and like that's such a needed thing. And it's so it's such a great, I feel like just such a great position, and can also just be built to be so much more. So I wouldn't be surprised in a few years if it's like just absolutely crazy, and like maybe you have a team that you bring on.
Hmm.
But I know for me, I feel like I annoy the crap out of my managers about career development, just because like I
That's
want to
good.
know what like my year looks like, what my year two, probably too
Hmm.
much, because like at a startup, there's a lot of unknowns, which is
Hmm.
not super great for the personality type I have, but I'm learning to kind of be okay with it. Um, but yeah, there's just not like defined, like my position only existed. I was the first one to get hired for it. Like it was a new position,
Hmm.
new role. So there were so many things that like I had to create because I was the first one doing it. And now so sometimes when I ask questions, my managers are like, kind of everything's up in the air because,
Oh,
you know,
yep,
this
startup.
is, yeah, like this
Yeah.
is just, we haven't approached this yet. Um, there's so much, I mean, my startup was like, I think there was like maybe 15 of us, or maybe like 12 of us when I first started last year around this time. And now there's like 25 of us, or like maybe closer to 30, which is absolutely insane. But there's just so much unknown in a startup environment. But it kind of brought the question in my mind too, like, do you kind of end up coaching people that end up going into that startup environment, maybe as a startup like product manager or startup like software engineer?
Mhm. Sometimes I do. I think usually people approach me. Well, what's interesting is like currently in my Instagram bio, I say that I help like self-taught developers, but I have like people of like all sorts of tech um uh tech roles that they want to get into that they like ask me for advice on, both paid and unpaid.
Oh wow.
Yeah, yeah. So everything from like tech sales, project management, product management, data, AI, and ML, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and of course, like different sort of software engineering,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting. Also, you brought up a great point about like bugging your manager about career development because I really do wish that I knew about doing that sooner, but I just never knew how to do that. You know,
Yeah.
um, it was only because like I was in a so PayPal has this mentorship program. They just pair you with somebody and you work with them for I think over for the next 2 months. And then he was actually the person to tell me like, yeah, every single one-on-one that he has with his manager, they're always like talking about whether or not he's on track for his promotion,
Oh,
right? Yeah, because
wow.
that's just part of like career development. And I also think that you know, as females, a lot of people, um, you know, we tend to downplay things and think
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I'm doing like what I need to get a promotion. But it's like unless you put it in front of the manager's face and you keep reminding them about it, that's when it will really happen. So
Yeah.
you're doing that.
Yeah, I feel like as like a female in like the work environment, you kind of gotta be louder. You kind of gotta like make it
Mm-hmm.
known. I think that's uncomfortable because, I'm not someone, for one, I'm not someone like that's gonna boast about like what I do or like my accomplishments. But I was actually talking to one of my coworkers. She was like, "Yeah, one of my friends read a book that said men are more likely to go for a position they're not qualified for." Um,
Mm-hmm.
and get it, and then women are more likely to apply for a job where they feel like they meet all of the requirements that they're actually like suited for. And it just made me think that like maybe we should be a little bit more confident in ourselves and our abilities. And I also, like, my dad growing up was always like, you gotta work for everything you have, so like you've gotta like
That's
just work
good.
10 times harder than anyone. So it's kind of something that stuck with me a little too much through my um career. Like I'm very new in my career. I'm only 24 and I've got a long probably career ahead of me, and it probably might change a couple times within the next few years. But yeah, I'm just super passionate about knowing like the next steps. And I think for some, they're like, they
Mhm.
see that as initiative, but others just like, man, like, why do you keep just bringing it up? Because if I don't bring it up, who is,
Yeah.
like, you can't wait for someone
Exactly.
to
Mhm.
bring it to you. Like, you don't
Mm-hmm.
want to get passed on because you weren't talking about it. In my experience, that's what's made me
Mm-hmm.
successful, because when I worked at Target before this, and man, I will never go back to Target. But like, I'll shop there because
That
I really
retail
love Target.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I worked in retail and I worked in college. I went to FSU, and I worked as a team lead during like my junior and senior year, and then I moved here to Las Vegas, and I was working at Target still as a team lead. But the reason I got the team lead job originally was because I was working as a team member, and I went up to my manager and was like, I'm interested in like, you know, just a leadership role. Is there anything opening? And I kept on asking him,
Mhm.
like every couple weeks I'd ask him, and he was like, you know what? I finally asked him. He was like, actually, we do have a opening coming soon. Like, do you want to interview for it? And I was like, yeah, of course. And so I was like, had I not asked for it, no one probably would have brought it to my attention, because they wouldn't have known that I was
Mhm.
interested. They wouldn't have, even though I was a hard worker, they wouldn't have thought to bring it to me. And I was like, that's just so full. You can't expect people to know or read your mind that you're interested in something.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I really do. Because like I'm in my late 20s and I'm just learning that now. I only learned that like this year. So I'm really glad that, you have that sort of confidence in yourself and yeah, you know what you want. So
I
that's
mean, it
how
varies
that's how
from
people
day to
grow and
day. It
hey, we're
honestly,
all human.
yeah, honestly, every day is a battle. But I feel lucky that, like, I had classes in college that kind of stressed the value of like LinkedIn and like
Mm.
connecting. And I think that's also so important is to like, when I go on LinkedIn, I'm reading people's like posts and seeing like how
Mm-hmm.
they've achieved certain things, or just like kind of feels like you're inserting like their mind on how they've developed their career. So it kind of gives you different ways to kind of, approach yours, which I think is super helpful. And like people like 10 or 20 years ago didn't even have that. Like they had to kind of
Mm.
work without all the tools that we have to be successful today. There's literally so many tools in the realm of careers that you have to just, be successful. Like you can take, there's like someone like you who can help you get into tech and, learn coding and all this kind of stuff. And 20 years ago, there might have been a greater barrier to entry. So I do think that we're like super lucky to be in the environment that we're in. But is there something that stuck with you, like something you learned, or just an experience that stuck with you throughout the journey you've taken to get into tech, or maybe someone that you've helped?
Over my last 6 years of my career, I think the overarching lesson is that it's just never too late to be who you really want to be. That actually comes from a quote from Robert, shoot, oh my god, Robert Frost. No, anyways, it's from a quote. Can't believe I
Yeah.
forgot who's like the author. Yeah, but the important thing is like it's never too late to be who you want to be, and because like I thought that I was too old to try to get into tech. I'm technically not that old either, but it's just like a sort of mindset. Like I've worked with people who, um, they asked me on a call, like, "Hey, do you think like an age would be a problem?" Because they're probably in their late 30s or in their 40s or even 50s. And then I've definitely had plenty of people DM me and ask like, "Hey, I'm in my 40s, do you think it'd be possible for me to get a job in the tech?" And I just tell them like, there's no harm in trying. Again, it's like the mindset thing that we always have to be aware of. And I guess it's easy to say for somebody who is not their age, but it's because like
Yeah.
I have seen success, and I have worked with clients who are in their 40s with teenage kids, and they are doing the thing that people some people in their 40s might be wishing, because
Yeah.
um yeah, but the thing is that they just don't have the confidence in trying to move forward with it. So
Yeah.
um so that yeah, that's the main thing.
I think that's honestly, it is true. Like, I feel like after a certain point, adults are like, can I really, like, I think there's also like probably some different worries on their end if they do have kids, or like, there's a certain point
Hmm.
where like you're truly just not worried about yourself, but you're worried about like the other people around you. And that
Yeah.
can stop you from like
Hmm.
doing something that you feel might be fruitful in the end. But it's also, when I was in college, I remember seeing like grown adults, like probably 30s and 40s, like in classes with me. I'm like, that's actually inspiring, because it isn't too late. Like, it's not too late to go back to school to get your master's, or to do something that you've always wanted to do. But I think the narrative is kind of like, for the past couple of years, is that you find your career, you stay, and then like that's your life. There's not, you don't see the stories where like I was 50 and I did this. You just see the story, like, at least from my experience, where your parents did the same thing for 40 years and that
Oh
was
my
that.
gosh. Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
because I mean, I know my dad's been at his job for like, I don't know, like 30 years. And I mean, he's been looking, I think in his experience, like he's been looking for another job in like, or I think he's been looking, or because he wants to move back to Florida with my mom. And he's like gone through interviews, but I think as an adult too, like there's some scary part about like trying to start in a new role, because although you're not supposed to discriminate, I feel like it does happen. And they think, like, a
Hmm.
company thinks like, how long is this person gonna be here? They're thinking about loyalty and like how, like, return on investment type of thing. And I think that's going through a lot of adults' minds too, is like, am I gonna be able to get hired? Like, I may have the skills, like, will I be able to get hired though? I remember like when I was looking for the job I have now, I had a lot of interviews for marketing jobs, but because I only had like my degree and kind of like no experience, just like here's this piece of paper that says like I should be qualified for this. Um,
Yep.
it was so hard to find a role, even entry level roles that wanted to like kind of take that chance, like, oh, I can learn, there was nothing, I had nothing on my plate to say, to kind of give me credentials as to how I could learn a role. And luckily, like I have that now because Composely took a chance on me. They kind of knew I had some knowledge based off my interviews, but they're like, she'll figure it out. And I did. But there's not a lot of companies willing to take that chance and like even train you to like do the role. You might be able to do it, but there's not a lot of companies that want to take that risk, I would say.
I think most of them are probably looking for someone like that already has the knowledge
It's
coming in.
easier.
It's a lot easier.
Ah,
Yeah.
yep. So that's really is the struggle with those who want to change careers and going into tech. I work with a lot of people who are making those 180-degree switches. People who work in as like nurses, teachers, like all sorts of backgrounds, even like law students who realize that they actually don't really want to go into law.
Yeah.
Literally like so many different kinds of people just really want the chance to get into a tech role. So a lot of them, a majority of people, they do go to a boot camp because they work best or they learn best in that sort of structured environments.
Yeah.
But what irks me about boot camps is that a lot of times they don't set up the graduates for success to actually get a job. And y'all understand marketing, like they put out so many ads and then everything looks really nice on the website, and
Yeah.
you're supposed to usually you go on a call with somebody to discuss with them about the boot camp, but at the end of the day, their job on the other end of the line is to get you to put down like a down payment. Yes, sign up. They want your money at the end of the day, And so sometimes that bothers me, and I wish more people they just had like the confidence in themselves. Like I think a lot of people it doesn't even have to be in coding, really. Like to get into tech, you can even go down like recruiting or tech sales. Gosh, even in like accounting, for example, if somebody has like the degree. And yeah, I think it's really just about having like the right sort of being in like the right sort of community, particularly like having a mentor be the best case, but just having that sort of like support system. Yeah, super important.
I will say that I have been victim of a boot camp. It wasn't a coding boot camp.
What kind of boot camp was this?
It was a digital marketing boot camp, and I was in a place.
Yes.
I was in a very vulnerable state in my life where I wanted to leave retail,
That's from a good
and
school,
I wasn't. I wasn't like getting any interviews at all for any marketing jobs. I was applying, so I was like, let me do this digital marketing boot camp.
From UCLA.
It was from UC Berkeley.
UC Berkeley.
And
UC
it's
Berkeley.
they did exactly what you said. They got me on a call and they were like, what do you want to do? And all this stuff, telling me how great the program was. And I sat there and I debated it too, which makes me so mad. I didn't like do anything after the call at first. I was talking to Caesar, I was talking to my dad. I was like, what do? I don't know if this will be worth it. And to me, in my eyes, I think the only beneficial thing, I don't think as a whole it was like a beneficial program because it was very baseline, kind of what I already knew. But it did kind of open my eyes into SEO. That was the first time I heard of SEO because we did like a little segment on it, and that's how I kind of got my passion for it. But other than that, it was not helpful at all. And I regret the money I spent on it. So they are some very convincing people, I will tell you.
I have a side note about these universities that have boot camps. So a lot of people, because I've talked to plenty of people who have either gone through them or they're very interested. And I also know somebody who actually started one of the programs at a university in Florida. not that particular university, but it's one of the colleges in Florida.
Yeah.
And what I gathered is that like at the end of the day, what they really do is that they contract this boot camp stuff out. And a lot of people, they have the impression that because they're getting a degree, well, not really a degree, it's really just like a certificate from
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
well-known university, that's what's going to make him look more desirable on paper.
Yeah.
But the thing is that a lot of the times these, like what you went through, it's all part of their sales and marketing initiative to get a lot of people into the program. Boot camp is just such a lucrative business. Like when you think
Yeah.
about it in a day, if you have like 30 people in a cohort and you're charging each of them $15,000, even if it's like something they'll pay down the line and not upfront, it's a lot of money.
It is. It's you think
Yeah.
about it in the terms, I thought like a boot camp in my mind should be something for one that's a little bit cheaper, than going to university, than taking college classes, because I have a bunch of student loan debt just from my bachelor's, and to then have to think about reinvesting into like a certificate, not even a degree, like was kind of like, this is a lot of money. Like you think, and they really sell you on it's going to be worth it, but it really is just kind of like a scam at the end of the day. I will say, like, all of it is a scam. I
So you're
honestly,
saying that none of it helped you at all?
no, I'm not saying it didn't help me. I'm saying that like I don't think in the scheme of like experience and education it did, because what they told me was a lot of like things for one I could have found on the internet, and I had learned in like my bachelor's. The only thing that I didn't know was the SEO stuff, and even then, all of my SEO knowledge comes from the actual hands-on experience that I have now. And so I think it was more clarifying for me, but I wish I didn't have to pay that much for clarity. Like, I don't want to have to, like, it wasn't worth it. And I think the whole narrative that I think that we're trying to change right now is that you don't necessarily need to pay as much for education. A lot of the resources are out there, like, for you. You kind of just got to be willing to like work for it and
look for it.
yeah,
That's the main thing,
exactly.
too.
You just have to look for the right opportunity and the right like information that you're looking for, because there really is so much out there. I think like even universities, like say if you were to get a degree, I think that's obviously there's some career fields where you always need a degree, med school, lawyers, all that.
Accounting.
Accounting, that's always going to need that kind of background. But there's more, I think, careers where you can kind of take a different route than going to get a degree. At least that's what I'm experiencing now. I see a lot of people going down different paths.
Exactly. Side note out there for people in the who are listening, boot camp, not all boot camps are scams.
Okay, yes.
Because I know you probably will get some angry DMs by saying that, but it's really hard to tell, right? Because like everything on their website, it's all set up to look like you're going to be successful. Like you'll learn from instructors who worked at top companies, and the founders probably came from like some sort of like FANG background. But a lot of people don't think about like, well, have these people actually tried changing careers themselves? Right? That's like the number one thing you should be thinking about. And then a lot of people, they'll go on LinkedIn and they'll talk to alumni, which is really good. I love that. You do want to do your background research. But the thing is, like, they don't think about reaching out to people who haven't found a job in like 9 to 12 months. Right? Like you also want to ask them like, what's the experience? Like, did they support you? Did they have if they said that they have like a career center and they'll help you with mock interviews, resume, LinkedIn, did any of that help? Because I have also talked to some people, like clients of mine, and they told me like, their boot camp, they did have some sort of like career support at the end of the day, and then they worked with a career coach from the boot camp, but they just did not get anything out of it. I'm just like, wow.
I think so maybe I should say they're not all a scam, but I think you do have to be very careful, because again, mine did have career coach, career center, and I got an email from one of them after I finished the program. I had already found a job. Like, oh, it looks like you found a job. Like, so, like, do you need help? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I honestly don't think it had anything to do with you. But yeah, I think it's just not very, like, they don't end up being as helpful as they should be, which is also kind of just sad because the people that usually sign up for those are people that really want something good to come out of it. I mean, if you're paying that much money, you're probably really hoping that something good comes from it. But enough about boot camps. I do think we kind of got into the right conversation about educations and backgrounds. But I always kind of wonder, this was my thing, because I think there's a couple different kinds of people in the world when it comes to the career. There's people who just want to make the most amount of money, which is not, frowned upon. We all need money. So like, if that's what you want to do, you do that. But there's also people who want to find like their passion, but also hopefully make money with that passion. How important do you think passion is when it comes to like switching your career into tech?
This is a really great question. I thought you were about to say like, how important is it to have a passion versus the money?
I mean, you can answer that too if you want. Like, you can do your take. I'm not gonna judge because I think everyone has different, what they want for their life.
Yeah, I think so to answer your question about how important passion is. So I think when someone's like starting out their career, it's more important to actually have money than to not have money.
Yeah.
than to so simply follow a passion. That's probably why, like, if everybody could, they should probably take like business or accounting classes in college while they can. Just so they can actually, because like everything in life like is gonna be revolve around a business. So if you can understand the ins and outs of it early on, more power to you, whether you decide to stay an employee or become an employer. And then in my opinion, once you do have like sufficient funds, then you can start like digging into passions. Sometimes you actually are not sure if passions are going to work out.
Yeah.
But you feel so strongly about it that you're like, oh yeah, I really, really do have to do this. Otherwise, I'm just going to flop over and like just be miserable for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And some people, they are going to be really successful. More power to those who have the sort of like confidence to do it, and those are the people who are successful. But for a lot of people, they believe that they have a passion to code until it starts getting harder, right?
Yeah.
And it there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, I've heard of this before.
Yes, it is so important to understand. So basically, it's like this. It's a reflection of someone's like learning journey, because in the beginning, and if anybody is an audience, they want to take a look at this on Google. It's basically like this chart, and what is showing is that on the y-axis is your confidence level, and then on x-axis is your experience level. And in the beginning, when you're learning something completely new, because we're not born knowing anything, right?
Yeah.
We're all like fresh white canvas, or just like there's just a fresh canvas when we're born, right?
Yeah.
So when we start learning something, let's say like how to code, let's say somebody's like end goal is like, oh, they're really interested in web development, so they start learning HTML, CSS. So their experience level is like at the zero, basically at 0 to 5, let's say, and then it just like shoots up because the confidence level is like soaring. They're going through like these beginner friendly tutorials about like how to build something really simple using HTML, CSS, and then they start digging more into it. They start learning about JavaScript. They start learning about like responsive web sizes, and then you hit what they call like valley despair. So you all of a sudden just like you're getting more experience, but your confidence just like sinks almost to like the bottom. And then that's actually when a lot of people just give up.
Yeah.
Because they realize like oh, it's too hard, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. But that's actually when people need to go and seek help.
Yeah.
So whether it's like going to a boot camp, whether it's going back to school, whether it's finding a mentor, or really just learning how to Google a lot better.
Yeah.
That's really a thing. And so that's why the first 2 times I tried to switch careers into iOS development, I hit the valley of despair both times. And I couldn't get past that. I did have other things going on in my life, but the thing is, like, I tried building like my own project and I burned myself out. Like, I was like, oh, I can't figure out this bug. I don't really know if it's really worth it. And then you take like, and then I would take like a week off or 2 weeks off, and then it becomes like a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the third time is actually when I developed like better habits, and I figured out how to get myself out of valley despair. Part of it is also having like a positive mindset and like a can-do sort of attitude.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's really easy to get stuck in that. Doesn't matter if you're doing a hobby, going to school and learning about, I don't know, physics or something like that. Um, you have to figure out like how to stay positive. Otherwise, and it just a lot of people just give up at that point. But then after that is what they call enlightenment. So you're starting to like push through it, and you get like a little more experience, and you have like more aha moments
Yeah.
because you're starting to build more understanding in the subject, right?
Yeah.
The more you do something, even if it's like the more code that you debug, the better you get at it. And that's also something that I had to learn while I was at my first job here in PayPal. So you hit like the enlightenment period, and then after a while, maybe it takes you 6 months, maybe it takes somebody like 12 months, you hit what they call like sustainability.
Mhm.
So you have higher confidence because you have more experience, and that's just like the cycle that people have to go through whenever they're learning something completely new. And yeah, that's just very important.
I kind of want to learn how to code now.
You do.
I just kind of like want to do it. See if I could, like, now I'm like a challenge. Can I get past the valley of despair? Like, can I do
Oh,
it?
for SEO, there's like a lot of people, they want to learn like machine learning or
Yeah.
AI, and SEO. That's where like it come in handy if you knew how to code a bit.
Yeah.
You never know. You could write something, and yeah, they could just measure the SEO of something, or like an article.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You design
Social
something that
media.
like reads the article or something like that.
I
Tells you
might do
score.
it.
Yeah.
I might do it. I always told Caesar, I was like, I think you'd be really good. Caesar's very like analytical, I would say. So I told him like when he kind of was figuring out what like his next like step in his career was gonna be, like I said, he has a background in like video
Video
editing and
editing and
video
production. Yeah.
production. He's
Hmm.
worked with a lot of kind of big YouTubers to kind of like scale their YouTube I guess business at this
Mhm.
point is kind of what they're creating.
Yeah.
Um
Mhm.
but I was like, I think you could be really good at coding because it's just how analytical you are, and I feel like you could just figure it out. Like it would just click with you. Unfortunately, he didn't want to do it at the time, but maybe the conversation will enlighten him a little bit. But I do think that is true. Like it's when you start to do something and it gets a little bit difficult, and like you it just really kind of is a jab at your confidence. Like I've felt that before too when I first started working in SEO. The thing about like optimization is like you can follow all the best practices, but sometimes like with I work with a lot of clients, like they might not have an optimized website, and like we're just specifically working with like blog content. Like we're not even giving ourselves a chance to like really rank, and so there's so many things that impact it that we don't have control over. So it can feel like, do I know what I'm doing? And then like I have something
Hmm.
rank and I'm like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing. So there's so many points in your career where you're like, oh, I had this win here, but then I had this like major like downfall. And it kind of, in each of those moments, like you either feel like I can continue doing this or I can't. And it is a mindset thing. I'm always talking about mindset because I just think the way we talk to ourselves and how we view certain things like obstacles really affects how we push forward or don't push forward. You know, Caesar like will
Mm-hmm.
be, I remember telling Caesar like he does he used to not be very good with Photoshop. Like he was good with Premiere and all that kind of stuff. But he was like, yeah, I just really don't know Photoshop. I was like, yeah, but if you keep on doing it, you'll learn. Like if you just keep on trying, it's like
Yeah.
it's all in your head that you
Mm-hmm.
can't learn it. I was like, you've taught yourself so many other things. Like this is just another one of them. And luckily now, like I feel like you're pretty
Yeah, no, I've
good.
gotten way better over the past like few months. Definitely, like one thing is just like,
Mm-hmm.
and I always tell Sunny this, like, and I don't know if it's like me, like, what do you call it? Not valuing myself to
Oh
like
yeah,
my
you do
ability.
not value yourself.
But I feel like if I put myself in the scale of like people that like know the Adobe Creative Suite, for example, like Adobe Photoshop,
Mm-hmm.
Illustrator, Premiere Pro, After Effects, all of that, I'm somewhere like in the middle between like someone who's like an expert and
A beginner.
not a beginner, no, like someone who like I've had years of experience in Premiere Pro, for example, but
Yeah.
this is from like an internal perspective. But if someone looks at my skills, they're like, oh, he's an expert. But I'm always looking to
Yeah.
learn. I guess that's what I'm trying to
I
say.
tell Caesar he's an expert.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't feel like an expert. I'm like, but you are.
No.
Like, if you like,
That's
you
how I
can,
feel about myself too.
Yeah,
I was
that's
like,
what. Yeah.
if you can teach other people, because I think that's the thing, is
Yeah.
Caesar's really good. If you can teach other people to replicate what you do, I feel like that's what makes you the expert, is your ability to teach and have success in like replication,
Yeah.
which you have. So it's like, don't like discredit yourself. Like if you've clearly had like multiple successes, like you're the expert. So I'm always telling Caesar, like, don't like just be confident in yourself. Sell your, because he's also trying to work with a lot of people. I'm like, sell yourself to them because this is what you've done. You're an expert. Don't tell them like, well, I kind of know what I'm doing. Like, no, you know what you're doing.
I mean, I don't say that anymore.
Yeah.
It's just more from like in a conversations that I have with like Sunny or in this case, his podcasts. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's just like I think as you get more and more, I don't know if this is true with people who get into coding and like maybe like 1 year of coding and 2 years, or like I've always seen those like videos where it's like my first month of doing X, and it's like maybe it's Unreal Engine or Blender, and then
Mm-hmm.
like 2 months later, like their work from starting 1 month in and like 3 months in is amazing to see like the improvement of like whatever it is that they're creating.
You
Same
know
goes
what
to
the
like
trick
video.
to that is?
Yeah, what's the trick to that?
It's the consistency,
Because yeah, it is, right?
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Because like if you let's take the Blender example, right? Because
yeah.
I actually want to learn that someday.
Oh man,
For those who don't know, this is a software where you can make really cool like 3D models, right? Of
yeah,
stuff.
3D modeling.
Mhm.
I mean, people do it for like game development to create objects that they then import into other like
Mm.
programs like Unreal Engine, stuff like that.
Yeah. So if we take that example, a lot of people they what is it? They start out with the donut. they make
Yeah.
they make the donut, the 3D donut in Blender. And yeah, you know, it's good. That's probably when you're like hitting the peak and you're like, oh yeah, I'm super confident in like me using Blender. And you start like using a little bit more and you're like, oh, I want to build this, but I'm stuck in like X, Y, and Z. And then people just are not able to move forward because they just don't really know how to Google or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they end up just like giving up. But I've seen like even myself, and I tell this with anybody that I work with um, in terms of like mentorship, that if you don't code a little bit like every day, you're like you're just never gonna like get to your full potential.
Yeah.
It's not just and it's like you won't get there as fast as you think as well, because like otherwise, like how did I basically went from almost zero to getting a job in 10 months, which is actually
Uh,
it's actually pretty fast. But also keep in mind that I was unemployed and pandemic was happening.
Yeah.
That was like peak pandemic in 2020. And so uh and then something else that I've noticed in people is that so they're inconsistent, but they also just a lot of people, they don't think outside the box.
Yeah.
It's like when we from the time we're growing up, you know, adults make decisions for us, mostly like parents, or you get pulled into what our friends and family think, so we do what they want. But then if you're trying to change careers or you're trying to just learn anything new, you gotta like have that sort of confidence. You just gotta like plow through it and also
Yeah.
believe in yourself, you know? It's like at the end of the day, especially if you're learning to code, a lot of people they don't know anybody else who's trying to teach themselves to code. And then so
Yeah.
that's when they're just like, oh, I can't do it. But you just gotta like people just gotta power through and um at the end of the day, it is a lot about like the mindset.
Yeah, and having definitely one point, one key thing that I realized, especially from this conversation, is just having either like a community or a person individually that you can speak to, like whether it's a mentor. Definitely when even with my own experience in video editing, I learned everything online through Google, like whether it was through Google
Mm,
searches or other watching
Even
other
now, you're
people.
still always
I'm still
watching when
always
you're
like,
mid edit, you're like looking something up, like
yeah,
you really utilized like the resources. But I think we brought to light something else too, is that if you don't use it, you lose it kind
yeah.
of thing. So like I remember I'm still trying to learn Spanish. I
oh,
took 6 semesters of Spanish and as well as like high school Spanish, and like at one point my Spanish was like pretty good, and now I'm not like I have a issue with confidence when it comes to speaking it. But if like when people come like learn a language, they think that they can learn it without actively like speaking to someone every day, or like, and you really can't, because it has to be so ingrained in your mind. And with like language, for instance, I had a teacher that was a linguist, and she knew like 5 different languages. She was originally from Russia, so she knew Russian, she knew Spanish. She spoke like 5 different languages, and she said she worked as a translator at one point too. And she goes, the thing when you're learning a language is like turning off like English and like just thinking, like trying to shift everything to think in Spanish. And that's such a hard thing. But I think that's like also kind of when you're learning anything, you've got to turn off like that self-doubt. You've got to turn off like the I can't do this, or like
Mhm.
this is too hard. You
hmm
really just gotta like, you've got to trick your mind to like be like, I can do this, because sometimes you just don't believe that it's possible, or like you get stuck after like you've had really great successes. And I know like I still like Caesar's tried to teach me Adobe Premiere for like, and my issue is patience.
Yeah,
I'm
patience is
not a
another thing
patient
too.
person, and I think
Yeah,
that has to do with it too. Consistency, but also
Yeah.
patience with yourself, because it like
hmm
Rome wasn't built in a day.
yeah,
And so you can't expect like, I think some people wake up and think today will be the day where I know everything. And it's just not. It's really not. You've got to be so patient with yourself and with the process, I would say.
Oh yeah, so important. I think that's a really good point to bring up because a lot of people they lose that sort of focus when they have so they like a lot of people I work with, they have the end goal of becoming a software engineer, but there's so many steps in between.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, yeah, they give up literally like in the beginning. And what I mean beginning is like they go through a course and then they're just like, ah, yeah, I did don't think like this is for me, and then they just kind of like drop out like flies. Or I have plenty of people who always DM me and they ask me like, how do I get into tech and how do I start learning how to code? And the reason why I don't focus on coaching those sort of people is because if you're not sure of yourself and what you want to do and where you want to go in your career in tech, it's difficult for me to convince you. And then
Yeah.
the other really difficult thing to teach somebody is uh um the consistency and just being dedicated in learning, making it like the number one priority. Like if you're trying to switch careers, you can't half-ass it.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, you really do have to like besides like the 9 to 5 job, prioritize having like 1 to 2 hours every day to work a little bit on the coding. And then it's like, well, okay, you know, once somebody gets in the flow, then yeah, I'm able to help them get to the next step, which is like refining their projects, building out a job worthy portfolio. Then you gotta like edit the resume so that it's like career change friendly. And then you gotta like update the LinkedIn and then start learning algorithm data structures, interviews. Yeah, it's a whole process that a lot of people don't think
Yeah.
about.
yeah,
That's true. That's like, there's just so many steps. I think that like when people are making career changes, they're just like, it's this and then this. It's like, no, it's just, there's so much that you're not even thinking about. But because you do,
Hmm.
like, you do take on like people to help, how do you go about setting like goals and expectations for them of like what is achievable and what the time frame looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of times, like I ask people like a lot of questions before I even like jump into like, this is what I think you should be doing, and this is why this will help you be successful. Um, so a lot of things like I often consider for somebody is, you know, where do they see themselves in a year?
Hmm.
Um, do they think that they want to give themselves a year to learn how to code and switch careers, or is it going to be like 6 months? And then where are they currently in the process? If they haven't even started, um, if they haven't started like their first tutorial on learning to code anything like Python or JavaScript, yeah, it's gonna take you a lot longer to get into tech. And but if somebody's already like tried building out their own projects and just need like a portfolio review advice, and then maybe they need help on their resume, then I can kind of like break it down to them further. But usually, oh yeah, something else that's really important for me to always consider for people is like, do they have a 9 to 5 job? Is it
Hmm.
full time? Are they working a part-time job? Um, are they unemployed slash taking a break from working? Because that means you can actually devote 6 to 8 hours on learning to
Hmm.
code for somebody who can only spend 1 to 2 hours per day. So then, those timelines will fluctuate. And I think a lot of times people don't think about that, even if they're talking to a friend who has maybe gone down that path of being like a self-taught engineer 7 years ago. Sometimes it's hard for those people to even like map out how long each process and each phase in the journey should take.
Hmm.
So that's in general like how I break it down, and I always try to like uh, yeah, keep those things in mind, tailor it to the person and what they want to try to achieve. Because at the end of the day, like they're the ones coding, they're the ones trying to get the job, not
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's
Mhm.
true. That's a really good like outlook to have. I do have like questions kind of related. I actually work with a client that works with like software engineers, software developers. So I've done a lot of outlines for like, different programming languages. What
Ooh.
do you think is the most, if you're gonna start coding, what programming language should you start with? And then also which one is most like, I guess, popular?
Or like I guess
Ah.
most needed probably,
Yeah, like
right? Yeah.
what's like the
Mhm.
yeah, most needed, I
Needed
think,
probably
is a
would
good
be.
one.
Believe it or not, it's probably one of the most frequently asked questions that I get is like, what coding language should I start out with? And I know others they tend to just tell people like, oh, you should do JavaScript or Python.
Hmm.
But my belief, like when I answer that question for people, I always tell someone like, figure out what you want to actually do first.
Yeah.
Right. Start by working backwards. Figure out whether like data engineering is something that sparks joy for you. Is it, or maybe data analysis? Figure out the difference between the two. If you really want to do something in data. Um, if it's iOS development, then um, that helps narrow things down because there's only one. It's really one main language for iOS development, and then um, but usually, like, what I want people to normally do is, like, go out and, like, just talk to people first to
Yeah.
figure out what would best suit themselves
Hmm.
for their next career, and then you start learning how to code for that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, like, that's in my opinion, like, that would be the best way to start out with it because. I've had instances where, I work with clients and then they started out learning JavaScript just because somebody else told them like, oh, it's in demand, you should
Yeah.
learn it. At the end of the day, and then they realize that they actually want to do something else, you
Yeah.
Yeah.
know? But they actually want to become like they're more interested in data instead. And
Yeah.
in data you don't use JavaScript. So yeah. I think it's really
I-
important to figure out
Yeah.
what someone wants first.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I never really thought about it like that. Like, I don't know a whole lot about Programming, thinking about it kind of makes my head hurt.
Yeah, it does. It makes my head hurt too.
But there are, from what I know, there are a lot of different, like, languages out there, and they all kind of serve a different purpose. So it makes sense to work backwards of like, okay, well, what's your end goal? But is there like a one that's like, oh, this would, if you're like, oh, I have time and I just kind of want to like play around, is there one that you would recommend starting with if they don't have like an end goal in mind? Like, I just have time and I see if I want to see if this is something I should pursue. Do you have like that recommendation?
Yeah, I would say JavaScript. JavaScript is a really great language to start off with. But also Python. Python tends to be what they call like readable type of language. And you can do so much with it. If somebody is also like interested in hardware, they can get what you call like a Raspberry Pi, and you can build out a lot of different stuff. You can build out your own thermometer, a smart mirror. You can build out like your own sort of like webcam device just off of this like little how much is it? I think it's like only $10
Oh, dang.
little circuit board. Yeah. People are curious. It's spelled like raspberry, but with the I at the end, and then pi, P-I.
Did you do
Yeah,
a
so-
post about that? Because I feel like I saw something on that. Like, maybe it wasn't on you, but I feel
I
like
think I might. Yeah,
I
think
thought I saw something on that
I did.
too. Yeah.
I feel like I might have
did,
saw you talk about that before. Yeah, that's
For hardware coding. I remember when those things came out as a kid. Well, not, I was like in middle school when I first heard about those, but I did. It's funny. I did have
Yeah.
interest at one point in like coding, long time ago. It just like you said, I just started learning a little bit of it, and then I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this.
I just remember
but-
I have a friend, like one of my best friends, his name is Spencer, and he did computer science in
Oh, yeah.
college. That was his background. So they did a lot of coding, and I just remember he'd be working on projects and would get so frustrated, and I was like, oh God, that seems awful. But I do think it brings up, like, we were talking about creativity earlier, and like I do think that is a way to like be creative and like solve problems, and I think that's important. For me, I know challenge is important to me in like a career. I always want to be challenged, so I feel like with that kind of environment, you're always gonna be challenged, and I think yeah, you're just always gonna be challenged, and so maybe that is something me and Caesar will do as like a see if we can who can do it first. But yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, also like with Python, you can also create your own scripts for like your computer. Like
Yeah.
I dated somebody once who was a data engineer, and then he had just gotten a job in San Francisco, so he needed to move. And this was back in, I think, like around 2018. And then so he was trying to find like the cheapest place to live. So he went on Craigslist, and instead of trying to go through like every Craigslist post, what he did instead was that he spent like 2 or 3 hours writing a Python script. So
Oh,
just
wow.
like scrape scrape Craigslist for San Francisco under these certain criterias. You want to like it to be return certain neighborhoods in San Francisco under like around different rent prices and square footage, and if they allow dogs or not. Yeah.
That's
So
Wow,
smart,
that's
though.
crazy.
Real life application
Uh-huh.
right
Yeah,
there. Like
that's
that
crazy.
just makes so much
yeah. Another like simple thing is like you could even like write a script so that every time you downloaded something that's of a certain file, like let's say PDF or JPEG or GIF, then it was saved to like certain folders on your desktop.
Yeah.
So I've also seen people do and you can anybody can also go on YouTube and look for these sort of different scripts that you can write to basically become like your assistant almost, but via your computer. I've seen
Yeah.
stuff for like
These are pretty
Spotify that you
cool.
can do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And also
I
with
think for file
Python,
organization it would make sense.
Yeah. So maybe that's like a good reason to pick up
Hmm.
Python.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Caesar today is just
I'm
like
actually write that down.
He's like, oh God, how can I optimize my life?
No,
Yeah.
seriously, workflow is one thing with video editing. When obviously you plug your SD card in, if you can have a script
Mhm.
that reads the files, puts them in separate, creates a new project like all at once, like versus me doing it
It's just like
manually.
it's
Like,
just opened the whole
yeah,
realm
no,
of
seriously.
possibilities of streamlining my workflow.
Well, you just
Um,
reminded me of something though, because I actually want to know her opinion on this one. There's this Reddit post I read a long time ago, where this guy was explaining his job that he had.
oh, I know what you're gonna say.
Yeah, I brought this up in a podcast before, and he using I imagine Python or some kind of coding knowledge. He ended up making his job that he was hired for, that normally would take 8 hours, um, and he brought it down by using his own computer, running some kind of code that he created, and it would do it in like 15 minutes. So he was, being hired on, working from, I think he was working from home, full time, but now he would basically at the end of the day just review what he was supposed to do, what the computer did for him. I mean, what do you think about like that, like optimizing a job and the workflow to the point where it could, in a sense, be taken over by a computer that you built code for yourself. So technically, it was his hardware. So
That's a product you gotta sell. Like
Yeah.
that's like
and all it was doing basically is his job was organizing was file organization. He would get clients that would dump, I think it was photos. So it was able to read the metadata from the photos and then organize the photos in certain folders and then upload them to like a client drive. So it was manual labor at one point. Somebody was actually going through it, and yeah, it was a lot of stuff. I guess that took like a lot of time.
Yeah. So I mean, it's possible that, even software engineers' jobs are going to get overtaken by, AI, robots, whatever have you. But also something to keep in mind is that there's always different kinds of tech roles and software engineering roles that are cropping up like every 5 years.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't say that like anybody should have like any sort of like fear of, um, oh yeah, someone could just write like this simple uh program and it would just like take over their job. Um, but I also just wanted people to understand that if you're gonna try to get into like software engineering, it's one of those fields where you do have to keep yourself updated because
yeah.
in 10 years that program is likely going to be obsolete.
yeah,
Like tech moves really, really fast. And so you always have to make sure that, you're keeping yourself like up to date on like what's the latest. And then if there's like a new sort of language out there in your particular tech stack that other people are starting to use, you probably want to learn it, right?
yeah,
Um, and that way, in the future, you're not gonna be afraid of like losing your job due to AI. So yeah, that's like my take on that sort of thing. And then honestly, like if somebody is able to write a script like that, or even writing a program to make their productivity or life easier, that's amazing, right?
yeah.
That's the thing is, I think for one, if it was that easy, more people would be doing it.
Oh
I think
yeah,
when it comes
yeah,
to like
Mhm.
just everything like software development, software engineering, I feel like it's more difficult in nature. Like my company that I work for currently we're currently trying to build out a platform, like our own like proprietary platform. And it's taken us like pretty long time. Like we have software engineers,
Oh
software
no.
developers, and building out the functionality of like the user interface and like just making sure like it all makes sense. That's a process in itself. And to think we just work with content, like I
Mm.
would say what we need our program to do is pretty pretty simple in comparison to probably what other programs do and what's already out there. But it does take, work and time, and
yeah.
hopefully it gets done by the end of the year. But because it's supposed to
Oh
make our
God.
lives easier, like it's supposed to make our lives easier, and that's why we're doing it. But yeah, I think that
I
stuff is
I
just
cringe as a software engineer, I cringe when people say like, "Oh yeah, it'll be really easy or simple to build."
Yeah.
Because a
Oh
lot of
no.
Oh
times,
yeah, I know I should have said that.
a lot of times, like unless you've coded before, it's like an overestimation of how simple
Yeah.
something can be. Like you all may have seen it on my Instagram, but there was recently I talked about how there was something that a designer wanted added in. Basically, like as you started scrolling on my team's app, there's going to be like a little shadow that appears in like the header and the footer, but then when you get all the way down to the bottom, then it disappears and it's only like a shadow under the header, right? So I know how to make that in Figma. It literally would take me only 3 seconds. It's so simple, but this issue took like 2 weeks to figure out,
Oh wow.
plus me having to go to other senior engineers on my team because of like how complex of the way our SDK is set up. And yeah,
Wow.
at the end of the day we were successful, but yeah, it was
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was
I did not mean to say anything was simple. I feel
oh,
like
it's
in
okay.
the mindset though, like is you think that it should be simple, right? Nothing is,
Right,
I feel
right.
like nothing is simple when it comes to development. But you do think like in comparison to what when you look at other like platforms, you're like, this is much more complex than we want. Like, why is this taking so long?
Mm.
I think, but yeah, it's what I think a company feels like should be simple is not simple in the slightest because we've been working on it since last year and it's not done.
Oh.
And I also don't know how many developers. I think that comes into play. I don't know how many developers we have or how many people are working on it. We just hired a project manager, not project, a product manager to run it.
Ooh.
But yeah, it's not simple. I couldn't imagine, like I think that's where my patience would like just run really short is like, why is this taking so
So long.
long?
Well, if you think about it, some things that maybe like let's say like you're using some sort of like CMS platform and you feel like it's too complicated because maybe there's like too many buttons on there, too
Yeah.
many choices, you can't find what you need. But in reality, that's actually a lot easier to just like dunk a bunch of like what a company or the platform thinks that you need onto the platform. And if they were to like scale it back to make it simpler, or even to like start from scratch, sometimes that can actually be harder.
Yeah.
And that's why like having the product manager is really good for your company, because then they can actually like go out there and do that sort of like user testing,
Yeah.
and actually help you hit that like end goal of what actually feels simple, right?
I'm really
So
Yeah.
surprised we didn't have one to start. Like that's what's crazy. Like we just got on board like 2 or 3 months ago, I want to say,
That's
and we've
probably
been
they've run.
working on it for like a while. So like we had
Yeah.
someone that we had like in charge, but they were like kind of like wearing multiple hats.
mm,
But yeah, it's definitely like I couldn't imagine like what you mentioned where it took you guys like you're like I could do this in 3 seconds here, but it took 2 weeks and like asking for help. Like I couldn't imagine. I feel like my patience would just go so like, damn, like why is this taking so long? But what would you say? This is kind of off topic too. Like, but what would you say your work-life balance looks like in like the realm of tech? And I mean, I feel like you're right in like the tech world in LA. So like,
mm.
You work for PayPal,
Well,
So it's
yeah,
one of the best tech.
my work-life balance, at least with PayPal, is really good. Uh, it is also team dependent, so
Mhm.
even if a company says that they have like great work-life balance culture, you still have to look at like what the team is and the org itself is doing. But I'm fortunate where um from like top down, like from our director, they say like, yeah, don't work on weekends and don't work nights. So we at least have that sort of like boundary, and
Yeah.
that's really good. And yeah, everybody has like unlimited PTO, and we can actually take the PTO whenever we need to, which has
Yeah.
been amazing for my mental health. And yeah, and then I also get to work remotely, but that kind of came with the pandemic anyway. And
Yeah.
so I was hired on remotely, otherwise I would have had to move to San Jose.
Oh
And
wow.
Dang. Yeah.
yeah. But I will also say, because I have this side hustle, so it's like the career coaching and also running the Road to Tech Instagram page. I right now don't have much of a work-life balance. I'm trying to figure it out, right? Because it's
Yeah.
the business has grown to where I spend almost 4 hours a day on it. And a lot of people, they're like shocked. They're like, what are you doing for it? But it's like I don't post like a lot about the behind the scenes
Yeah.
on Instagram. It wouldn't be the right place to do it. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's just a lot that has to go on behind the scenes,
I
and
imagine. Yeah.
try to figure out how to streamline that and um optimize like different steps. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
my
I mean,
life.
I think when you're in the position you are, where you have like a full-time job and you're also building out this other thing that could really almost become a full-time job, that you do start to feel like, okay, I don't like have any balance. But I think that kind of comes with like the territory too. When you're trying to build
Mm,
something out, like it really does take all like the extra time. And I mean, Caesar and I, like, I work like, sometimes I work like 50, 60 hours depending on how crazy my week is.
oof,
And then I'm like, we still have to shoot this podcast because I want to do
oof.
something with this podcast on the weekend. And so like sometimes like I am like kind of like, oh man, I'm so tired. Like even this weekend I was like, I just want to sleep. Like that's all I want to do. But I was like, we have a podcast to film, and then Caesar, he edits the podcast, and then I'm clipping things for shorts, and then I'm thinking about like social strategies and like, also reaching out to other people, like
Nice.
who else can we bring on? And it's like people really don't think about, like, I know personally probably people in my life, they think, oh, that's just something she's doing for fun, but I'm like, no, I'm putting in work because I want this to be fruitful and I want it to grow. And
Mm-hmm.
I also like doing it, but I think even when you're passionate about doing something, it is still a job, it's still work. And I think people don't
Yep.
think about it. It's because just because you want to be doing it doesn't make it any easier sometimes. Like I can imagine
Mm-hmm.
some days you're like, I'm glad that like I have this opportunity, I'm glad that all of this is like at my like feet, but like it's also like you still have to put in like 100% effort, and sometimes maybe you're not feeling all the way there. So I
Mm-hmm.
can definitely like feel like how that could just be, I don't know, I feel like that's draining. So like honestly, props to you, because I I don't know that I could do all of that.
Well, I am starting to learn how to outsource.
Oh,
So
that's good.
I know you all have like certain skill sets that I would love to chat with you about after this, that
Oh
For
yeah,
maybe I
for
sure.
can
sure.
like
For sure.
utilize.
Yeah, for sure.
um yeah, I think the key thing about like work-life balance, um just from like a 9 to 5 perspective, is to just try to um figure out like what you need in your life, like what do you want to prioritize besides work. And then
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if someone wants to prioritize work, that's okay too, because like
Hmm.
we gotta let other people do what they feel is best for them. And if
Yeah.
like they really want to grow and they want to become like let's say like CTO of a big tech company, like go do you, right? Go
Yeah.
work all those hours, go do all the networking that you need to do. But then if some other people say like, oh yeah, family is priority, then they are gonna um try to carve out more time. But I think what's really important is to and I learned this early on from like a senior on my team, and I'm so glad she told me this early on, is that like for herself, she has very specific times that she does work. The reason why she never has to work past 5:30 is because during like the 8 hours of work, she only does the work. She doesn't like dilly dag and like take a bunch of naps and like go surf the internet and watch a bunch of
Yeah.
YouTube. Um, so she actually gets the work that she needs done during that time frame. But she also does not feel bad for cutting meetings short at 5:30, or
Yeah.
telling the managers like, hey, this meeting is gonna last till like 6 or 7. That's like past when I normally finish work. And so they'll come to a compromise, or normally what's great is like managers are willing to either move the meeting to like different time or just like different day, but just like setting boundaries like early on,
Yeah.
and like setting those expectations first. And I'm also a proponent where if somebody is not happy about something related to the job, that they should actually try to talk to their manager,
Yeah.
and have like multiple conversations. Because I've seen many times that, even like with my friends that, as soon as like they're unhappy with something in a job, they just kind of like keep it to themselves and they'll rant to friends, they'll rant to coworkers, but they don't talk about it with their manager. And I'm
Wow.
just like, okay. And then that's also the reason why people leave a lot, right? Because they're
Yeah.
unhappy with their manager. But at the end of the day, hopefully, like the manager is doing their job where they're trying to grow your career from within the company, and then they do want you to stay. So try to like work with them and decide like what's best for you, but then also consider your own values, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's how my therapist has told me, like, if you are, like, stuck in your career and you're trying to figure out, like, if you just switch jobs, if, like, money is the most important, if it's, like, certain aspects of the job that's more important, at the end of the day, it really depends on, like, your personal values and does your job fulfill those? And if it
Yeah.
doesn't, then you wanna maybe, like, reconsider things or just, like, I don't know, change things up, you know?
Yeah.
So, those are important.
I'm glad that you like say that though too, because I think it always does depend on personal preference. My personality type is like kind of like just work, 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 because I feel like that's right now my career is like what's super important to me. Like while I also want balance, like I am focused on my career and I feel like the best way to move forward is to just put in everything that I have. And I have friends who like know like this to them, like they have their own values and things they want to do. They're like, if I like I'm on FaceTime but I'm also working, I'm like, hey, like I'm working. They're like, why are you still working? It's past this time or it's past this time. I was like, because like I'm trying to set myself up here. Like I obviously like
Mhm.
I need to create boundaries for myself, like in what I need, but like they think there's also a narrative out there right now where it's like kind of like the opposite, like don't work more than you have to or don't do this. And it can
Oh
be
god.
so it's
That
so
quiet quitting thing.
Yeah, quiet
yeah,
quitting. Yeah,
it's
that's
so
what we're
conflicting
talking
to
about.
me because I'm someone who like I can understand people who are like I can understand both sides of the spectrum and like we did a whole episode on quiet quitting and I understand where people
Oh.
come from, but I also am someone who just was like kind of wired a different way where I'm like I
Mhm.
physically can't be that type of person. I physically can't be like I'm only going to give this much effort because I just care too much and I also value like just my reputation and like what that says about me as a person and so it's so hard for me to balance like everything that's being said out there but like about careers right now. It's just crazy.
So something that I actually learned, I think it was 3 years ago, from a good friend is about morning routines. And I have been practicing that for like the past few years, and it's changed a little bit. I think like the only true consistent thing that I've kept up with over the years has been like making a healthy, protein-rich breakfast every morning because that
Strong.
gets me energy and also keeps me full. Um, and so there is this book called The Morning Miracles.
Mm,
What's the author's name? Something, I think
I think I read
Elrod.
that book. Like
yeah.
Caesar, you gave me that
Yeah, I
book.
gave you that book.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, what did you all think?
I liked
Read
it,
it such a long
honestly.
time
I
ago.
read it in college. Caesar gave it to me
Yeah.
when we first started dating. And at the
Mhm.
time, I was someone, for one, who hated mornings. I was not a morning person, but I also crave productivity. And I feel like I'm most productive when I have like a really good morning. Um, but yeah, I
Mhm.
haven't read it in a while. I still have it on bookshelf. I should probably read
Reread
over
it,
again. I
yeah.
really liked it when I read it, though. I thought it was very like inspiring.
Mhm. Yeah, and like what it did for me was that I honestly there's an entire version of the book on the audiobook on YouTube, and I just listened to the first 2 chapters. And that's all I needed to motivate myself to actually put in morning routines in place. So I
Yeah.
was like, for anyone out there, like you don't have to really buy the entire book to figure out like a morning routine and what that can do for you. But for me, it was really important back in 2019 that I had actually started morning routines because I was going through like so much in my life where
Yeah.
like every day was unpredictable because of uh maybe being unemployed or trying to go through job interviews, getting rejected a lot from
Yeah.
those particular jobs that I wanted, and then going through like trying to learn how to code and then get a job from that. So what had really grounded me and kept me sane was really like having a morning routine.
Yeah.
That way, like the mind and also the body can expect the same thing every day, even if the
Yeah.
rest of the day is like chaos. So,
It's like
um,
controlling what you can control, and like it's
yes,
also, I think that's what
yes.
like goes back to consistency. Like, I don't know if you've ever like heard of the book Atomic Habits, but it kind of
Mm,
also plays on that fact, like you've got to build habits, and like the longer that you like do the same thing, the like more it becomes routine. And I think a lot of people struggle with routine. Like, I'm someone who thrives on having kind of a set routine, but I'm also someone who struggles with like getting up. Like, I always tell myself I'm gonna get up at this time, and then like I don't wake up on time. I'm like, okay, I should do this.
yeah.
I'm like, next week is the week that we do it. So it's all about consistency, and the more that you do it, the more that it just kind of becomes the things that you
Yeah.
do. It becomes so much easier. So this podcast is about like growth, and it goes back to both professional and like personal growth, and honestly just kind of working towards being the person that you want to be versus like the person that people tell you that you should be. What's advice that you have to people maybe that aren't looking to break into tech per se, but are just looking for that career change, or just looking to take the next steps to whatever career that may be and whatever they're interested in? What is like one piece of advice that you would give them?
I would tell people to go out there and like talk to people. Stop surfing the internet to look for advice on like what career or what to do with your life, because um there's just something about actually talking to someone face to face, preferably, or even like on a Zoom call, that you can gather so much more from someone's like actual perspective in their day-to-day life than you can from something online. Because if you think
Yeah.
about it, like everything online, from like blog posts to YouTube videos to podcasts, even, it's all very curated, and it's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
like it's all related to the SEO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you really do need something unfiltered, and then that's also a way where you can ask questions that are most important to yourself, that
Yeah.
pertain to yourself, and also like get their genuine perspective. That's also like how I learned about different roles in tech and try to figure out like what was best for me. It's just because like instead of going online and looking at different jobs that are out there, um I just talked to 3 product managers, and they gave me their perspective on what I could do, and then also learn from them about like the different sort of roles within tech. Um and that's really how I got started, and I was able to also ask for them like different resources, who else should I meet? And you can't do this, or I guess you could, but it's just being a little more challenging if you were just trying to do this all through searching on the internet. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's kind of like when you read a book, you're really only putting in like about I don't know, like $5 to $25 into a book with for like so much knowledge that
Yeah.
you can't get off of a 20-minute YouTube video ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's true.
people just need to really go out there and actually talk to real people to figure out what they really want to do with themselves. And talking to people also pertains to any industry. This is not just for tech. So
Yeah.
that's
It's
what I
true.
would
That's
say.
true.
I always felt like I've gotten the most value by like meeting up with someone who has had more experience in the field that I wanted to work in, like whether it was like video editing or production stuff. Like I've gotten some of the most best advice from like either talking to them like in person or like over the
Mhm.
phone, like just getting like a different perspective, That really,
Yeah.
I
yeah.
think it also
Yeah.
goes to asking the right questions
That's
to
it.
that people, because if you go and you meet a person and you don't have like really what you're looking for the answers to, like it's not gonna be super fruitful for
Yeah.
you.
Oof.
Um,
Yeah. I have plenty of people in my DMs like always asking, how do I get into tech? Well, how can I get started? And it's actually more useful to ask somebody else like uh something a lot more detailed.
yeah.
if someone wants to ask me, how do I get into tech? I would just end up asking them a bunch of questions, try to like figure out what exactly they're
Yeah.
interested in. So kind of like do some soul searching first to try to figure
Yeah.
out what exactly you really want to do before you ask people specific questions like what is it like to be like a woman in tech? What has your experience been when you were learning to code? What kind of challenges? Just trying to like dig down a little deeper. Um, and also the other big thing is like to try to talk to people who have actually been in your shoes before,
Yeah.
especially in terms of like education background. The reason why I actually didn't go and do boot camps is because at that time in my life in 2018 and 2019, all the software engineers I had met, they were actually all self-taught, believe it or
Oh
not. Some of
wow.
them even like were college dropouts, and
Wow.
they I ended up being successful as like software engineers. And they were actually the ones to encourage me to not go down the bootcamp route. Um, and that's actually why I didn't do it. And I know a lot of people, they do boot camps because they have friends who have done it and are probably successful in it. And so that's why they decided to try it out themselves. So make sure like um yeah, the best case scenario is like finding somebody who is actually done your particular major in school and then now is doing like the ideal job that you're really interested in. So that's like kind of how I would go about it.
Yeah, that's important because like everyone has a different experience and the background can make all the difference. The route can change depending. So like you really need to like hone in on like who you talk to because they might have been successful for a completely different reason because they had a different background or
Exactly.
it made it. Yeah, that's something you don't think about. You
Yeah.
just think about going to someone who has the job you want and not necessarily the path that they took. And the path is probably
Mm.
what's more important because that's what's going to help you get there. And yeah, that's so crazy. I didn't even think about that. I'm gonna be thinking about that all day now. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you decided to join us. I greatly appreciate you taking the time on this Saturday. I know it's not ideal for some people on Saturdays, that's their rest day. So I'm just so happy that you joined us and just thank you so much. I think this is going to be so valuable to anyone that listens to our podcast and just out there that's looking to make any career change, not just in tech. I think a lot of this information can be transferred into a lot of different fields as well. Um, but yeah, just thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much for
inviting
joining us.
me.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been a pleasure getting to chat with you all, and it was not awkward, which is great.
There's always that
Like,
fear.
yeah, sometimes that happens in podcasts.
Thanks everyone for watching this episode. We had such a great time talking to Stephanie and just kind of getting a new perspective. And I think that's Caesar and I's goal when it comes to this podcast, to bring on more people that we can sit and have discussions with and just gain more insight and knowledge and learn from each other because we don't know everything and we're kind of working based off our own experience, but we're also trying to open our minds to what else is out there, the different perspectives, different mindsets, and it's super enlightening every time we have one of those conversations, wouldn't you say?
It is. No, every time we have someone new, I'm always like, man, like I kind of get, I mean, obviously I get where she's coming from and all this technology. And like when it comes to you wanting to shift into a new career or making a job change.
Yeah.
So it's always really cool to hear those things.
It definitely has us, like, after the end of the episode, we're like, wow, like, what a great conversation. And it's very just it continues to motivate us just as people and continues to motivate us to want to grow more. So we're so glad if you made it to the end of the episode. If you are new here and you're just watching our podcast for the first time, please like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast platform, please give us a review. You can get the podcast to automatically download when we upload new episodes. All of it helps us greatly, and we just love doing this podcast, and we're gonna continue at it. We all start at zero, and I think we're gonna have a lot more great conversations to come in the future. This has been Growing Together with me, Sunny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We hope to see you again next week.
See you guys later.